Outlaw's redemption. Saving the Apache woman made him her eternal husband. Jake Callahan moved like a shadow through the western plains. The wind swept across the dry grasslands, carrying the faint smell of smoke from distant towns, but he didn't care. His life had become a series of fleeting places, quick escapes, and the constant need to stay one step ahead of the law. Once, he had dreamed of a quiet life, of waking up to the sunlight streaming through a cabin window, but that dream had died long ago. Years ago, Jake had been different. He had a family, a small home on the edge of a peaceful town, and a heart full of hope. But a raid had changed everything. The memory of it was etched into his mind like a scar he could never hide. In a single night, he lost everything he loved. The town had burned, the laughter of children had been replaced with screams, and the warmth of family had been replaced with an unbearable emptiness. That night, something inside Jake had broken, and he had wandered into a life that no man would ever envy. The life of an outlaw. Outlaws like Jake were not always the fearless, romanticized figures that people imagined in stories. They were men and women pushed to the edges of society, surviving in the shadows, living each day on the knife's edge. Jake had become skilled at reading people, at knowing when danger was near, and at disappearing before anyone could catch him. He had learned to trust no one because every person he allowed close had the power to hurt him, intentionally or not. Despite this, Jake wasn't heartless. He carried a silent code, a quiet sense of justice that he rarely admitted to himself.
He never harmed the innocent.
If anyone threatened people who couldn't defend themselves, Jake would intervene, but only if it didn't put him at too much risk. It was a complicated way to live, a life balanced between survival and the faintest glimmer of morality.
That glimmer, however, was fading as the years passed. One morning, Jake found himself hiding in a small canyon near the edge of the forest. He had narrowly escaped a posse that had been tracking him for days. The memory of their mounted horses pounding across the earth, the shouts of men seeking revenge or reward, had haunted him during the night. He pressed his back against the cold rock and allowed himself a moment of rest. The canyon walls were high, offering shelter from the wind, and for the first time in many days, Jake could breathe without fear. As he sat there, memories of his past crept into his mind. He remembered teaching his little daughter how to ride a pony, her small hands gripping the reins with determination, and her laughter echoing across the meadows. He remembered his wife, her gentle voice calling him home for dinner, her presence like a warm light in the darkest moments. Jake closed his eyes and felt the ache of loss, the loneliness that had followed him like a shadow. That afternoon, he moved cautiously through the forest, following a narrow trail that would eventually lead him toward a small town where he could rest and resupply. Every sound of cracking twigs or rustling leaves made him tense, a reflex from years of living under threat. His eyes, sharp and observant, scanned every branch, every shadow. He had learned that danger could appear in many forms, not just men with guns, but wild animals, accidents, and even the simplest mistakes. Survival required constant awareness. Jake's life had been a series of mistakes and second chances. He had been caught in small towns, had spent nights in crowded jails, and had negotiated his way out of punishments more than once. Each experience had hardened him, teaching him patience, cunning, and caution. But he also carried the weight of guilt. The guilt of the life he could have had, and the life he had chosen instead. It was a heavy burden, and it kept him awake at night, staring at the stars through the gaps in the trees. Despite his careful ways, Jake occasionally allowed himself small comforts. He enjoyed the quiet of the forests, the gentle sound of water from a stream, and the sight of animals moving freely through the wild. These simple pleasures reminded him of the life he once had and the man he could still be if he chose a different path. But Jake had long ago stopped hoping for miracles. He survived, yes, but he did not live. Living, he believed, required trust, attachment, and love. all things he had lost and could never regain. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Jake set up a small camp. He built a modest fire, careful not to attract attention. The warmth reminded him of the fireplaces of his old home, the smell of burning wood bringing back memories of dinners shared with his family. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine that he could return to that life, that somehow the past could be undone, but reality always returned. Jake knew that the path he walked could not be reversed. He had made choices, some out of desperation, some out of anger, and all of them had consequences. Birth. Yet even in his solitude there was a faint spark inside him, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, life could still offer him a chance to redeem himself. He did not yet know what form that redemption would take, but he felt its distant presence, like a faint light in the darkness. As the night deepened, the forest became quieter. Jake sat by his fire, listening to the distant calls of owls and the rustle of leaves in the wind. The stars above shone brightly, reminding him of nights he had spent staring at the sky with his daughter on his shoulders, pointing out constellations and telling stories. Those memories brought a mix of sorrow and comfort. Sorrow for what he had lost, comfort for what he had once known and could still carry in his heart.
Jake's life had been one of constant motion, of evasion and survival, but something inside him was shifting.
He didn't know it yet, but his past, his regrets, and his experiences had prepared him for a new journey, one that would test his courage, his heart, and his sense of honor. A journey that could transform him from the feared outlaw he had become into someone capable of love, loyalty, and true redemption. For now he remained alone, the firelight flickering across his face, casting shadows that seemed to dance with the memories of his past. Jake Callahan, the man who had known loss, danger, and solitude, was on the edge of a path that would change everything. The wind whispered through the trees as if carrying a message meant only for him, a message of hope, of courage, and of the unexpected ways life could bring two souls together. As he lay down to rest that night, the stars above watched silently. Jake did not yet know that the coming days would introduce him to someone who would challenge everything he thought he knew about trust, love, and destiny. But deep within him, a quiet readiness began to grow, an unspoken understanding that life, no matter how dark, still had a way of surprising those willing to face it. And Jake, for the first time in many years, allowed himself to wonder if he might be ready to face that surprise. The next morning, Jake woke to the soft light of dawn filtering through the trees. The forest was alive with the gentle sounds of birdsong and the rustle of leaves, a peaceful contrast to the chaos of his life. He stretched and checked the small supplies he carried, his mind already planning the safest route to the next town.
Though he had spent years moving cautiously through the wilderness, the forest now seemed almost welcoming, as if it had sensed the change beginning inside him. As he followed a narrow, winding path through the undergrowth, he noticed something unusual.
Breaths. A faint trail of footprints diverged from the main path. They were hurried, uneven, and fresh. Jake's instincts, honed over years of surviving danger, told him to investigate. He moved silently, keeping low, scanning the forest for any sign of trouble. After a few minutes he heard voices, soft but urgent and tinged with fear. He crouched behind a large oak tree and peered through the branches. There, in a small clearing, he saw a young woman surrounded by 3 men. She struggled, her hands tied, but there was a fire in her eyes, a determination that refused to yield to fear.
Jake recognized immediately that she was in danger. The woman was unlike anyone he had ever seen.
Her hair was long and dark, flowing in the wind, and her eyes were sharp, filled with both intelligence and courage. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that made her stand out, even in a moment of peril. But Jake noticed that the men with her were rough-looking, careless in their actions. and focused only on their prize. They didn't notice him yet, giving him the perfect opportunity to intervene. Jake's mind raced. He knew he could take them by surprise, using his knowledge of stealth and the terrain to his advantage. He assessed the situation carefully. One man was leaning against a tree, distracted, while another was trying to force the woman to walk with him. The third stayed slightly back, keeping watch. Jake took a deep breath, his heart steady but alert. He had rescued people before, though it had been years, and something about this situation felt different. He didn't hesitate.
Moving with the precision of someone who had survived countless dangers, Jake crept closer.
He found a fallen branch that could serve as a distraction and, with a swift motion, sent it crashing through the underbrush near the man on watch. The sound startled him, drawing his attention away from the woman. Seizing the moment, Jake sprang from his hiding place. He grabbed a small but sturdy stick from the ground and struck quickly, disarming one of the men before he could react. The other two men were now aware of the newcomer, but Jake was faster. He moved with the speed and skill of someone who had learned to survive in a world that offered no second chances. The men were strong, but Jake's years of experience, his agility, and his strategic thinking gave him the upper hand. Within moments he had subdued them enough to create a chance for the woman to escape. "Go," he said softly, his voice low but commanding. "Run to the trees. I'll handle them." The woman hesitated for only a second, then nodded, her expression a mixture of gratitude and determination. She darted into the forest, her movements quick and sure, showing the skill of someone familiar with the wilderness. Jake stayed behind, keeping the men distracted long enough for her to disappear from view. The tension in his body eased slightly, but he remained alert. He knew the threat wasn't entirely gone, and his instincts told him to stay ready for anything.
When the clearing was finally quiet, Jake allowed himself a brief sigh.
He knew that the woman was safe, at least for the moment, but he couldn't leave her to face the dangers of the forest alone. Something inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, compelled him to follow her. He moved through the trees silently, tracking her by the faint sounds of her footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. After a short while, he found her resting near a small stream. She had chosen a secluded spot, hidden by bushes and tall grass. Her breathing was steady, and though she was clearly shaken, there was a strength in her posture that impressed him. Jake approached slowly, making sure she noticed him but not threatening her in any way. "You're safe now," he said gently. "They won't find you here." The woman turned to face him, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of caution. "Why are you helping me? Call me Jake," he replied simply. "I've seen enough danger to know when someone needs help."
You don't have to explain yourself. Her eyes studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception.
There was something in his demeanor, something genuine and quiet, that made her hesitate to doubt him completely. Finally, she nodded slightly, a small gesture of trust. "Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't know anyone would come." Jake felt a flicker of warmth at her words, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. Helping someone, risking his own safety for another person, it was unfamiliar, yet strangely right. "We should move," he said. "It's not safe to stay here for long. There may be others looking for you." She agreed, and together they moved through the forest, keeping to the shadows, avoiding open spaces where danger could be waiting. Along the way, they shared little about themselves, enough to establish trust, but not enough to reveal vulnerabilities. Jake learned that her name was Ayana, which meant eternal blossom in her language. She was part of a community that lived in harmony with the land, people who valued honor, courage, and respect. Bay.
Ayana's courage amazed Jake. Even after being captured and threatened, she didn't crumble.
She kept her composure, thinking clearly and moving with purpose. Jake had expected fear, tears, perhaps pleading, but instead he found a strong, determined spirit. Her strength sparked something in him, a recognition of the goodness and resilience that still existed in the world, something he had almost forgotten. As they traveled, Jake kept a careful watch. He knew the men who had captured Ayana could return, and he wanted to be prepared. But he also began to notice the way she moved, her awareness of the forest, the subtle way she adapted to obstacles. It reminded him of his own skills, honed over years of surviving in harsh conditions. Despite the danger, there was a sense of connection forming between them, a silent understanding that they were now bound by circumstance and shared challenge. The day passed slowly, filled with cautious movements, quiet conversations, and the constant alertness required to stay safe. By evening, they found a small, hidden clearing near a stream where they could rest. Jake started a modest fire, careful to keep it small and controlled. Ayana watched, her expression thoughtful, appreciating the practicality of his actions. "You're very skilled," she said, her voice breaking the silence.
You saved me. I don't know how to thank you. Jake shook his head.
"You don't need to thank me. I did what I had to do."
But it feels right.
He avoided looking directly at her, uncomfortable with the unfamiliar feeling stirring inside him.
It had been so long since he had acted purely for someone else's benefit, without any thought of himself, that he wasn't sure how to respond. For the first time in years, Jake felt a sense of purpose beyond survival. Protecting Ayana, helping her reach safety, gave his life direction he hadn't had in a long time. The forest around them, once just a place to hide, now felt like the beginning of something new, a place where old wounds could start to heal, and new trust could grow. Bay. As night fell, they took turns keeping watch. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting silver patterns on the ground. Jake watched Ayana as she slept, noting the tension in her body slowly easing. He realized that her safety was now deeply tied to his own sense of worth. For the first time, saving someone else felt like saving a part of himself. Little did Jake know that this was only the beginning. Ayana's presence in his life would challenge him in ways he had never imagined. Her courage, her wisdom, and her kindness would awaken something dormant within him. The possibility of redemption and the chance to build a life not defined by fear and loss, but by trust and connection. The forest was quiet, the fire crackling softly. Jake and Ayana, strangers brought together by fate, rested under the same sky, unaware of the adventures and challenges that awaited them. But one thing was certain: their meeting was no accident. Destiny had brought them together, and neither of their lives would ever be the same again. The morning air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Jake stirred from his restless sleep, careful not to wake Ayana, who had spent the night in cautious rest nearby. She moved with a quiet grace as she prepared herself, tying her long hair back and checking her small pack of belongings. Psst. Jake watched her silently, struck by her calm strength, and realized again that the woman he had rescued was unlike anyone he had ever met. He knew their journey would not be easy. The land between the forest and her people's village was rugged, filled with dense forests, open plains, and unpredictable terrain. Jake had spent years moving through similar landscapes, but even he recognized the dangers that lay ahead. Bounty hunters, wild animals, and sudden natural obstacles could all turn a simple journey into a fight for survival. Yet he was determined to see Ayana safely to her people, for reasons he could not fully explain even to himself. "Are you ready?" Jake asked quietly, breaking the morning silence. Ayana nodded, her dark eyes steady. "Yes, let's go." They began their journey slowly, moving carefully through the trees before reaching the open plains. Jake stayed slightly ahead, scouting for any signs of trouble, while Ayana followed with quiet confidence. Despite the dangers, there was a rhythm to their movement, a silent understanding forming between them. Jake had rescued her, yes, but now he realized that her skills and instincts were just as vital to their survival as his own. As they traveled, Jake learned more about Ayana's world. She spoke sparingly, but each word carried meaning. She told him of her people who lived in harmony with nature, valuing courage, respect, and knowledge passed down through generations. Her stories painted a picture of a community bound by honor and tradition, a world so different from the one Jake had known, a world where strength was measured not by fear or intimidation, but by wisdom and loyalty. "You speak with such pride of your people," Jake remarked, watching her carefully as she moved over a fallen log. "They must be remarkable." "They are," Ayana replied, her voice quiet but firm. "And they are waiting for me. I cannot let anything stop me from returning to them." Jake nodded, silently respecting her determination. He had spent so long running avoiding connection that it felt strange to protect someone not out of self-interest, but because it was the right thing to do. Yet, as he walked beside Ayana, he felt a growing bond forming, an unspoken trust that linked them together. He realized that this journey was not only about her safety, but also about his own path towards something he had long believed lost: purpose. The first challenge came unexpectedly. A sudden storm swept across the plains, dark clouds rolling in and wind whipping through the tall grass. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, soaking them within moments. Visibility dropped, and the once familiar terrain became treacherous. Bears. Jake kept his eyes on the horizon, scanning for danger, while Ayana followed closely, her movements careful but assured. "This way," Jake called over the wind, leading her toward a narrow ridge that offered some shelter from the downpour. They moved quickly, navigating slippery rocks and uneven ground. For the first time in years, Jake felt the thrill of genuine teamwork, relying on someone else's presence to share the burden of survival. Ayana, too, moved with focus, demonstrating skill and awareness that impressed him at every turn. After several tense hours, they found refuge under a rocky outcrop. The storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and the forest sparkling with raindrops. They rested briefly, sharing a simple meal of dried meat and water. There was a quiet comfort in the small act, a shared human connection that neither had expected to find. "You are very brave," Ayana said softly, looking at Jake with a mixture of respect and curiosity. "Most would have left me behind in that forest." Jake shrugged, a faint smile touching his lips.
I couldn't.
"I don't know why, exactly. Maybe because I didn't want to." He paused, considering his words. "Maybe because I needed to do something right for once." Ayana studied him, sensing the truth in his words. Best, she understood loss, pain, and the quiet struggles that shaped people in unexpected ways. Though they had only known each other a short time, there was a sense of shared understanding between them, a recognition that life could be cruel, but courage and kindness could still prevail. As the days passed, they encountered further challenges. The forest gave way to rolling hills, and they navigated narrow trails and hidden valleys. At one point, a small river blocked their path. The water was swift and cold, and crossing it required careful coordination. Jake went first, testing the depth and current, then guided Ayana across with steady hands and patient instruction. "I am very careful," she remarked once they reached the other side safely. Jake looked at her, smiling faintly. "Experience. And you're very capable yourself." "I'd follow you anywhere in the wild, I think." Her eyes met his, and for a moment there was a shared warmth, a quiet acknowledgement of the trust and partnership forming between them. It was a bond neither had expected, but both felt growing stronger with every step. Despite their progress, danger was never far. They occasionally spotted figures in the distance, men who might have been bounty hunters or travelers unaware of their presence. Jake taught Ayanna how to move quietly, how to recognize signs of others in the forest, and how to remain vigilant without letting fear dominate. She learned quickly, adapting her skills to the needs of the journey. In turn, Jake found himself admiring her resilience, her intelligence, and the calm strength she carried even in the face of uncertainty. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they set up a small camp on the edge of a meadow. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the quiet of the evening felt almost magical. Breaths. They shared stories of their pasts. Not the darkest memories, but those that shaped them, that gave them identity and purpose. Jake spoke of his lost family, carefully leaving out the pain too deep to revisit, while Ayanna spoke of her people, their traditions, and the values she cherished. "There is much I have never seen," Jake admitted, gazing at the stars emerging above. "Brave. A world that is brave and beautiful and different from the one I thought I knew." Ayanna nodded. "There is always more to learn, more to experience. And sometimes the path is difficult, but the journey makes it worth it." The bond between them grew with each passing day. What had begun as a rescue had transformed into a partnership. Jake found himself thinking of Ayanna not just as someone to protect, but as someone who challenged him to be better, to see the world in a way he had long forgotten. Ayanna in turn saw in Jake a man capable of courage and honor, someone willing to risk himself for another, someone whose heart, though guarded, held the potential for loyalty and love. Their journey was not without hardship. They faced exhaustion, hunger, and the constant awareness of unseen dangers. But through it all, they learned to rely on each other.
Jake guided Ayanna when the terrain was difficult, while she offered insights and perspectives that kept him alert and thoughtful.
In the quiet moments, they laughed, shared small victories, and discovered the joy of companionship, the kind that is forged in shared trials and mutual respect. As they approached the foothills that marked the territory of her tribe, Jake felt a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. He had succeeded in bringing her this far, but he knew that gaining the trust of her people would be another challenge entirely. Yet he also knew that whatever lay ahead, he would face it with her by his side. The journey had changed both of them. Jake was no longer just a man running from his past. He had begun to embrace the idea that he could be more than an outlaw. And Ayanna, once a captive in a dangerous situation, had found a protector, a companion, and someone who respected her strength and courage. Together they had overcome obstacles that would have defeated many, and together they were learning the true meaning of trust, resilience, and partnership. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Jake and Ayanna paused on a ridge to take in the view. Below them lay the path they had traveled, filled with trials and triumphs, dangers faced and overcome. Ahead lay new challenges, the unknown of returning to her tribe, the uncertainty of acceptance, but also the promise of a new chapter in both their lives. Jake looked at Ayanna, her hair catching the last light of the sun, her eyes reflecting determination and hope. He realized that this journey was not only about guiding her home, it was about discovering who he could become, about facing the possibility of redemption, and about embracing a connection that had begun unexpectedly, but was now undeniable. "Tomorrow we reach your people," he said quietly. "And whatever happens then, we face it together." Ayanna smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and quiet confidence. "Together," she agreed. And with that, they rested for the night, ready to face the final stretch of their journey, a journey that had already transformed them both, and that would continue to shape their hearts, courage, and destiny in ways they could not yet imagine. The early morning sun stretched across the hills as Jake and Ayanna approached the outskirts of her tribe's territory. The journey had been long and difficult, filled with dangers that tested their courage, patience, and trust in one another. But now, after days of travel, the familiar sights of her homeland unfolded before them. Dense forests, flowing streams, and open meadows where the people lived in harmony with the land.
Ayana's pace quickened slightly, not from fear but from anticipation.
Her eyes shone with a mixture of relief and nervous excitement. For years she had longed to return to her people, to see her family and friends again, and to be among those who shared her traditions and values. Yet she could sense that something was different this time. The man beside her, Jake, was no longer simply a rescuer. He had become a companion, a protector, and someone whose presence brought unexpected comfort. Jake, for his part, walked quietly, alert to the surroundings as always. But he had grown to respect Ayana's people from the stories she had shared during their journey. He knew that gaining their trust would require patience, humility, and respect for their ways. The outlaw life he had lived for so long had taught him survival. But this was different. This was about honor, integrity, and proving that he could be more than the man his past had defined him to be. As they approached the village, they were greeted cautiously. The people emerged from their homes and shelters, curious and wary. Ayana stepped forward, her posture confident but respectful, speaking in her native language. Jake followed silently, observing the reactions of the villagers. He noticed the cautious glances, the murmured questions, and the subtle gestures of uncertainty. An elder of the tribe, a man with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom, stepped forward. His gaze fell on Jake, sharp and penetrating, as if measuring the weight of his soul. Ayana introduced Jake, explaining how he had risked his own safety to rescue her. The elder listened carefully, his expression unreadable, and then spoke in a calm, measured tone. "It is rare," the elder said, "for a stranger to show such courage and respect. But yet actions alone cannot define a man. We must see his heart, his intentions, and his willingness to honor our ways." Jake felt the weight of the words. He had expected suspicion, perhaps even rejection, but he had not anticipated the challenge of proving himself to an entire community. "Desperate." He nodded respectfully. "I understand," he said simply. "I only wish to do what is right." Over the next several days, Jake worked alongside the tribe, learning their customs, assisting with daily tasks, and observing their way of life. He helped repair structures, gather food, and navigate the surrounding land. Each act, no matter how small, became a step toward acceptance. The people watched him carefully, noting his dedication, patience, and humility. Ayana, meanwhile, remained close, offering guidance and support. She saw the effort Jake was making and was quietly proud of him. She understood that trust was not given lightly in her community, and she respected the balance between patience and action. Through their shared efforts, the bond between them continued to grow, deepening with mutual respect, understanding, and the unspoken connection forged during their journey. One afternoon, Jake accompanied Ayana to a sacred clearing where the tribe held ceremonies to honor the land and their ancestors. He observed with reverence, mindful of their traditions. When the elders spoke, sharing wisdom about courage, loyalty, and the responsibilities of living in harmony with nature, Jake listened intently. He realized that these lessons resonated deeply with him, touching parts of his character that had been dormant for years. "This is where I learned to understand my place in the world," Ayana whispered, her voice carrying a sense of awe.
It is where we learn respect for ourselves, for each other, and for all living things. Jake nodded, feeling a sense of connection he had never experienced before.
For so long he had lived in isolation, believing that survival alone was enough. But now he saw that true strength came not just from skill or cunning, but from integrity, compassion, and the willingness to protect and honor those who could not protect themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the village glowed with the warmth of fires, Jake and Ayana shared a quiet moment alone. The day's labor had been long, and both were tired, yet there was a serenity in the air.
Ayana turned to Jake, her eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper, a recognition of his efforts, his sincerity and the courage it had taken to earn the trust of her people.
"You have done more than I could have hoped," she said softly.
Bit. Not just for me, but for everyone here. You have shown honor, patience, and respect.
That is what matters most. Jake felt a warmth he had not known in years.
I never expected this, he admitted.
To be accepted,
to feel like I belong. But with you, it feels right. It feels like something I've been missing for a long time. Ayana smiled, and in that smile, Jake felt a sense of completeness. It was not just the relief of reaching safety or the success of their journey. It was the knowledge that he was finally walking a path of redemption, guided by courage, respect, and the bond they shared. In the days that followed, Jake continued to immerse himself in the life of the tribe. He participated in ceremonies, shared stories, and contributed to the community in any way he could. Slowly, the villagers began to accept him, seeing not the outlaw of the past, but the man he had become. Someone willing to act with integrity, to honor their ways, and to protect those in need. The elder, once cautious, eventually approached Jake one morning. "But, Bice, you have shown your heart through your deeds," he said. "You have risked your life for another, respected our people, and embraced our values. That is the measure of a man. You are welcome among us." Bask. Jake felt a profound sense of relief and humility. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his past lift, replaced by a quiet pride and a sense of belonging. He knew that his journey of redemption was ongoing, but this acceptance marked a significant turning point.
Ayana watched him with admiration and affection.
She had known from the beginning that Jake was capable of more than survival, that he had a heart willing to care, to act, and to honor the lives of others. Seeing him recognized and accepted by her people brought a deep sense of joy and reassurance. As the days turned into weeks, Jake and Ayana grew closer. Their shared experiences, the challenges they had overcome, and the mutual respect that had developed between them laid the foundation for a profound bond. What had begun as a rescue mission had blossomed into something far greater, a partnership built on trust, courage, and love. One evening, under the clear night sky, the tribe gathered for a celebration to honor their harvest and the strength of their community. Jake stood beside Ayana, feeling a part of something larger than himself. The music, the laughter, and the sense of unity filled the air, and for the first time, he allowed himself to fully experience the joy of connection and acceptance. Ayana turned to him, her hand brushing lightly against his.
"You found a place here," she said softly.
and you found yourself as well. That is why you are welcome, not just in our village, but in my life.
He glances around in despair. Jake looked at her, feeling a mixture of gratitude, relief, and something deeper he could not yet fully name. "I never thought I could belong anywhere again," he said quietly. "But with you,
I feel like I've finally come home."
Vielda approached once more, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Remember this, Jake," he said.
Redemption is not a single act, but a life lived with honor. You have begun that journey, and the path ahead will continue to shape you.
Walk it with courage, and you will always be welcome here. That night, as the village slept under the stars, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought him here.
The outlaw who had wandered alone for years, burdened by loss and guilt, had found a path toward redemption through courage, compassion, and the trust of another. He had faced challenges, proven himself to a community, and, most importantly, discovered the power of connection and love.
Ayana lay beside him,
her presence a comforting reminder of what he had fought for and what he had found.
Together, they had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, and emerged stronger, bound not just by circumstance but by choice. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time Jake felt a sense of peace and purpose that had eluded him for so long. The sun rose the next morning, casting golden light across the village. Jake and Ayanna stood side by side, ready to face whatever the future held, confident in their bond, their courage, and the lessons they had learned. But redemption, Jake realized, was not about erasing the past, but about embracing the present, living with integrity, and forging a future guided by honor and love. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had welcomed him and the woman who had shown him the way, Jake knew that he had finally begun the life he was meant to live. The morning sun rose gently over the village, casting golden light across the land. The trees swayed in the soft breeze, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers, fresh earth, and the warmth of life itself. Jake stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the horizon, and for the first time in many years he felt a deep sense of peace. The outlaw who had once roamed alone, haunted by loss and regret, had finally found a place where he belonged. Ayanna approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the grass. She had changed too, in ways both subtle and profound. The strength and independence that had first impressed Jake had grown even stronger, tempered by the shared journey they had undertaken. Her eyes met his, shining with warmth and affection, and Jake felt a rush of emotion he had long thought impossible for him to feel again.
"Good morning," she said softly, a smile lighting her face.
"Pet." Jake returned her smile, a little shyly. "Good morning," he replied. "It feels right. Being here. With you, with them, with this place."
Ayanna nodded. "It is right," she said. "You have done more than survive, Jake. You have become part of something greater."
"Bae. And you have become part of my life, in a way I never expected, but I am grateful for every moment." Their bond had grown steadily over the weeks since their arrival. Through shared labor, lessons in survival, and quiet conversations under the stars, they had discovered a trust and understanding that went beyond words. Jake had learned to embrace compassion, patience, and humility, while Ayanna had discovered the quiet courage it took to rely on another, even after facing danger alone. Together they had built something lasting, a partnership founded on respect, love, and shared experiences. As they walked through the village that morning, the people greeted Jake with smiles and nods. He no longer felt like an outsider.
He had earned their trust through action by showing his willingness to respect their ways and protect those who could not protect themselves. The elder, who had once watched him warily, now offered a kind smile and a nod of acknowledgement.
Jake felt gratitude swell in his chest. He knew this acceptance was not the end of his journey, but it was a milestone he would carry with him forever.
Ayanna took his hand gently, and they walked toward the river that ran near the edge of the village. The water sparkled in the morning sun, and the sound of its flow was soothing. They sat on a flat rock, side by side, and watched the water move. "You know," Ayanna said, "I was afraid when I was captured."
"I thought no one would come, that I would have to face everything alone. But then you appeared. You risked yourself for me, without expecting anything in return. I don't know how to explain the depth of gratitude I feel, or the respect I have for you."
Jake turned to her, his expression earnest. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said, quietly. "I did it because it felt right. I didn't know it would lead to this."
He gestured to the village, to the people, and then to Ayanna herself. "I didn't know it would lead to finding someone like you."
someone worth trusting, worth protecting. Ayana smiled, leaning slightly closer. And I didn't know I could find someone I could rely on, someone whose heart is as strong as his actions. You have shown me that there is courage and goodness even in someone who has faced pain and hardship. The connection between them was undeniable. Years of loneliness, loss, and wandering had faded, replaced by a shared sense of purpose and love. It was a love born not of instant passion, but of trust, respect, and the courage to stand by one another through challenges. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and the unknown, and in doing so had forged a bond stronger than either had imagined possible. Days turned into weeks, and the two continued to build a life together within the village. Jake worked alongside the people, learning new skills and participating in traditions he had never known. He discovered joy in small things, helping build a shelter, learning to fish in the river, and listening to the stories of Ayana's people around the evening fires. Each day was a lesson, not just in survival, but in living with integrity, honor, and connection. Ayana, too, thrived. She had found her protector, companion, and equal in Jake. Together they faced challenges that tested their patience, courage, and ingenuity. Whether it was repairing a broken fence, helping guide the young children through the forest, or planning for the community's needs, they became a team, complementing one another in ways neither could have imagined before.
The villagers noticed this partnership and admired it.
Jake had become a respected member of the community, not because of past deeds, but because of the man he had chosen to become. And Ayana's presence, wise and courageous, shone even brighter with Jake by her side. Together they represented the best of what the tribe valued: courage, honor, respect, and loyalty. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the fields and birds sang from the trees, the elder approached Jake. "You have grown in ways many could not," he said kindly. "You have faced your past, embraced the present, and shown that the heart can change. That is the truest measure of a man. You are welcome among us, not as an outsider, but as a protector, as a companion, as one whose life now serves a greater purpose." But Jake bowed his head, feeling the words settle in his heart.
Thank you,
he said quietly. "I will honor this trust. I will live in a way worthy of it for as long as I am able." That evening, the village gathered for a celebration of life and community. Fires burned brightly, children laughed, and music filled the air. Jake and Ayana stood together, holding hands, and felt the warmth of belonging wrap around them. They had faced countless trials to arrive at this moment, and now they could celebrate the triumph of courage, loyalty, and love. Ayana turned to Jake, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. "You have become part of my life in ways I could not have imagined," she said softly. "And I want you to know, my heart has chosen you, not just for what you have done, but for who you are." Jake felt a lump rise in his throat, emotions he had long buried finally finding their voice.
"And my heart has chosen you," he replied, his voice steady but filled with feeling. "You have given me a life I never thought I could have."
You have shown me love, trust, and a reason to be more than I was. I cannot imagine my life without you."
They embraced, a quiet and profound union that spoke of years of struggle, survival, and shared triumphs. The villagers watched with warmth, recognizing the bond that had formed between the two. It was a bond not born of convenience or circumstance, but of courage, mutual respect, and the choice to walk together through the trials of life. Over the following weeks, Jake and Ayana continued to strengthen their bond. They worked together to improve the village, taught each other new skills, and shared stories long into the night. Their love was evident in every action. The way Jake supported Ayana in her endeavors, the way she encouraged him to embrace new experiences, and the gentle, unspoken gestures that showed care and devotion. As time passed, Jake realized that he had truly found what he had been missing for so many years: a sense of purpose, a community that valued him, and a partner whose presence brought balance, joy, and meaning to his life.
Ayana realized that she had found not just a protector, but a companion, a confidant, and a love that would endure.
One evening, under a sky full of stars, Jake and Ayana sat by the riverbank, holding hands and watching the water flow.
Breath. The sound of the river was soothing, a reminder of life's continuity and the endless possibilities that lay ahead.
Do you think we've earned this? Ayana asked softly, her head resting lightly against his shoulder.
Burrs. Jake smiled, gazing at the stars. I don't know about earning it, he said quietly.
But I know we've faced what came before us, together, and we've chosen to be here, with each other and with this life.
That is enough. Ayana nodded, a peaceful smile on her face. Burst. Then let us live it fully, she said, with courage, respect, and love. And so, Jake and Ayana began a life together in the village, surrounded by people who welcomed them, guided by values that honored courage, loyalty, and integrity. Their love was a testament to the power of trust, resilience, and the choice to walk beside another through life's trials. They faced challenges as they came, but they did so together, knowing that whatever the future held, their bond would remain unbroken. Jake, the outlaw who had once walked alone through shadows of his past, had found redemption not through a single act, but through a life lived with honor, love, and commitment. Ayana, the brave and proud woman he had saved, had found a partner who valued her courage, matched her strength, and chose to walk beside her for all days to come. As the sun rose each morning, and as the river continued its endless flow, Jake and Ayana's story continued, not as a tale of danger and fear, but as a testament to love, loyalty, and the enduring power of the human heart. They had become each other's home, their connection eternal, and together they faced life with courage, hope, and unwavering devotion.